Mr. Rusty Buckets released a video called "Can Luka Doncic Still Be the GOAT?" A question that honestly I haven't asked to myself in a minute. But let me know in your comments down below, if you think Luka still has a chance to be the GOAT. Shout out to Rusty for the video as well. Links to his video will be in the description down below. But let's have this discussion of if Luka can still be the GOAT.
Having an electrifying rookie year and then immediately making the superstar leap in his sophomore season, a lot of people started to put him in the potential GOAT conversation. Guys who could realistically achieve GOAT status when there are very few players that you can put that kind of projection onto. But now, 6 years into his NBA career, he is at the age of 25, and there's definitely room for him to achieve more, and whether or not the GOAT conversation has passed him by is something that I want to discuss in today's video. Hello everybody, welcome to Ask Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference on how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm.
Show love,
the reason
chat.
I've been thinking about this is there's been a lot of conversation around Victor Wembanyama specifically and his ability to be the GOAT. And a lot of people have argued, and I agree with this point for the most part, that Victor Wembanyama was almost designed in a lab to be the greatest basketball player there ever was. Like, to have all the skills that he does while being 7'5". Hard to compare that to really anybody else. And that's not a knock on LeBron or Michael Jordan. You're just not 7'5" with guard skills. It's just kind of the way that it is. So for that reason, I was thinking like, well, we're talking about Wemby, but Luka Doncic was the guy we were having this conversation with just a few years ago. Have we moved on from that, or is that still something that's reasonable for him?
I think you can have two players that are on pace to be in the GOAT discussion. You know what I'm saying? Like, if LeBron and Kobe had the question would be, could they have the exact same careers they would have had if they were drafted at the same time? But now we've had, you know, GOAT level players playing in the league at the same time before. I don't know why this era would be any different. I will say this: I think when it comes to the GOAT conversation, to be the greatest of all time, to be in that conversation, it is a very, very nitpicky conversation. It is a very, yeah, that's pretty much it. Very nitpicky conversation. You have to check a lot of boxes to truly be in that conversation. And I've always said on this channel that if you don't have a case for you to be the best, or for not necessarily be the best, but if you don't have a unique case to your career as to why you have done something that no one else has done in NBA history, I don't think you're in that conversation. I don't think you are. So, and there's only a select few players that, in my opinion, truly have that case. Michael Jordan, LeBron. It's going to be weak because of the counter arguments that you can make to it, but Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal, and maybe Magic. I think Kobe has a case as well. I think Kobe has a case, a weak case. Again, just weak. It's a weak case, but is there. Steph Curry has a case as well with the impact and things of that nature. So with Luka, I'm just trying to figure out what that case would be for him. You know what I'm saying? Is Luka the... You would have to, in my opinion, bring up eras. The fact that, you know, Luka is in the most advanced era in NBA history, and out of all these guys, he's the best, and things of that nature. But to be in that GOAT discussion, I think you have to check a couple of boxes. Number one, it's crazy. Again, it's a crazy nitpick, but I feel like you're already behind the 8 ball if you don't start off your career dominating the shit. Like, Michael Jordan came out the gate 28.5 points a game, right? By year 3, he was averaging like 33. You know what I'm saying? Kareem out the gate was 34 and 17. Wilt Chamberlain was 38 out the gate, I believe. Hold on, let me look at Wilt. Wilt was 38 out the gate. You know what I'm saying? LeBron might be the only anomaly, but he came out of high school, and even out of high school, he was putting up 21, 6, and 6. But by year 2, he was 27, 7, and 7. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do think there's a level of, yo, you have to be great out the gate, which Luka, in my opinion, has checked off. right? Luka in his rookie season, 21, 6, and 8. And then by year 2, already fourth in MVP voting, 29, 9, and 9 in his sophomore season. I think he has checked off that specific box, and he has maintained that production ever since. We are now in year 6 of the Luka experience, and he keeps on getting better. You know what I'm saying? So Luka checks off that box. I also think within this discussion, peaks really matter as well. Is there a 3 to 4 year stretch in your career that is just so dominant? You have to say, yo, this is one of the greatest players we've ever seen. Like, yo, it's on some, yo, what the fuck are we doing type of peak. So for Michael Jordan, you know, it was an 8-year peak for him. For LeBron, again, we can argue an 8-year peak for him. For Luka, what is that peak? I actually think Jokic is a guy who's having one of those peaks right now of, bro, from a statistical standpoint, he's doing crazy shit. He may win 3 MVPs in 4 years. He may win 2 rings in 4 years. And then in that year he didn't win, he was still second in MVP voting. So a potential 4-peat MVP. The stats prove it. Playoff elevation proves it and all of that shit. And rings. I think rings do matter in this conversation, whether you like it or not. Because if it didn't, then Karl Malone would be in these discussions, because from a statistical standpoint, Karl Malone statistically is like crazy. And from a longevity standpoint, Karl Malone is like a top 5 longevity player. You know what I'm saying? If rings didn't matter, I think KG would be considered more in this discussion. He also had longevity. He also had crazy peaks. I don't think he was great off the gate. Yeah, it took him like, you know, a couple of years to really get into KG form. But yeah, rings are a part of this. You know, in recent history, we now look at Steph Curry in a different light after that 22 ring before compared to what we looked at him before that. You know, so it's just a very fickle conversation. If you don't meet these certain little things, you're kind of out. I'm sorry.
To achieve. Now being like 6 years into his NBA career now, he's put up some ridiculous numbers. He is going to be very high on the all-time assist and scoring lists, and there's a decent chance he'll be pretty freaking high on the rebounding list too, because he's at like 8-9 rebounds a game for most of his career. He's also mega efficient, just one of the most unstoppable scorers I've ever seen.
They don't seem to have any answer whatsoever.
Well, they're not the Lone Ranger in that regard. Luka has done this to many teams this year. What?
That's a crazy shot, by the way.
Gotta get it in. Here's Luka. Gets it away. It's gone! A Doncic dagger!
Unstoppable playmaker, a generational playmaking talent. He is truly one of the most talented basketball players I've ever laid my 2 eyes on. So with that in mind, I do think he has the skill set, at least offensively, to get in that conversation, which does bring you to the defense, which is something that is interesting about him, because I think it's partially the era he's in where we don't really value defense in the same way that we did in the past when evaluating these all-time greats, but it is something that will come up. And I think Luka and his bad defense, I don't think he was ever a terrible defender, and he was only a bad defender for a small stretch of time. But he's definitely not a strong, huge, major positive defender by any means. He can definitely say that's the case for a lot of all-time greats, for a lot of GOAT candidates, at least at the peak of their career. You know, LeBron.
Yeah, I think that's another nitpicky thing when it comes to the GOAT conversation. And let me just say this too. I truly don't have a problem with it, because within this discussion, we are talking about the best player to ever lace them up. And if we don't have extremely high standards for what that is, then it's like, I feel like it loses its meaning. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, me and Omar were having this discussion on the Let's Keep It a Buck podcast like a couple weeks ago of like, how much does defense matter? Not only when it comes to being the best player in the league, but specifically with the greatest of all time discussion. Can you be the greatest basketball player to ever lace them up? Without being a great defender. And I brought up the counter argument. What if there's a player that, like, and this is going to sound extreme as shit, averaged 45 points, gave you 13 assists, gave you 9 rebounds, was super efficient from the field, was an MVP his rookie year, won 7 championships in his career, never lost in the finals, was clutch, passed the eye test, all of this, but he was Isaiah Thomas defensively. Is that guy disqualified from the GOAT conversation just because he didn't play defense? I personally would say no. At the end of the day, I think the game is about winning a basketball game. And if your play, not only from an individual standpoint, time in and time out again, continues to drive winning basketball to that degree, then it's like, all right, it's kind of like the bag conversation. I don't give a shit if you don't have a bag, or if you do have a bag. Does your basketball play produce winning basketball? And does that lack of a bag affect that thing? You know what I'm saying? So in that hypothetical scenario, it doesn't. So why would that player be penalized for not playing defense? You know what I'm saying? But also on the other regard, you can also make the case that, like, listen to what the fuck you're saying. You'd have to be so great offensively to counteract being so bad on defense when it comes to the GOAT conversation that you would need to put up 40, 15, and win 8 rings. And when it comes to Luka, when it comes to a Steph Curry, yes, great players offensively, right? 33 points a game, has the gravity, off-ball skills, efficient as shit. But there are also NBA players in history who, if that's a 10 out of 10 offensively, they're at like a 8.5 to a 9. But then defensively, the offensive leaning player is like a 5 out of 10 defensively. But then you got the Kareems of the world, the LeBron Jameses of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Kobe Bryants of the world, where defensively, they're a 9, 10 out of 10 player. Hakeem Olajuwon, another one. 9, 10 out of 10 player.
LeBron kind of stopped playing defense for certain years of his career, but for the best of them, he was one of the best defenders in the entire NBA. Michael Jordan, one of the best guard defenders of all time, if not the best. Just having that aspect is definitely something that's very limiting to Luka, so that's a factor here. The other thing is, what exactly is he achieving by what age? So he doesn't have a title yet. He doesn't have a Finals MVP yet. That's fine at this stage of his career because not a lot of players get that by the time they're 25. Even Michael Jordan and LeBron James, who I'm going to be referring to throughout this video because they are the 2 GOATs. Literally, I don't think there's a valid answer besides for those 2. In order to get into that conversation, you need to win titles, you need to win MVPs. Michael Jordan and LeBron James did not win their first championship until they were 27 years old after many years in the NBA, and Luka has had those same many years and has, if anything, been reminiscent of what the early years of Michael and LeBron's careers looked like, which was just this freakishly talented young player who's surrounded by not all that much talent. Of course, this year he has Kyrie Irving, and this is the best roster he's ever played with, but up until this year, it's been bad. Jalen Brunson was there, but he wasn't Jalen Brunson in New York, and that was the best he got otherwise. Other than like when Kristaps Porzingis wasn't broken every other couple of months. Otherwise, it's been a pretty piss poor showing from the Mavericks front office, which is exactly what the Bulls were initially, and it's especially what the Cleveland Cavaliers were with their first stint with LeBron. You just hope it doesn't bleed over as long as it did with LeBron, or in the ways that it did, and I think the Mavericks have done a much better job of addressing their future than they were previous. And I just want to acknowledge something here, a take that I routinely have. And I just want to, give myself some credit for Luka being the perfect example of this. And this is tangentially related, and it's also related to Wemby. I have said with Wemby and with the Spurs, whenever you have someone like Wemby, you need to go all in immediately. Like literally as fast as you can conceivably do it without being stupid and short-sighted, you need to make that decision and you need to make it quick. Because look at Luka now. He's a couple of years into his career. It feels like that happened yesterday. It feels like Luka was drafted yesterday. And they just spent a bunch of years fucking dilly-dallying, and now we've arrived to a good roster, which hopefully can keep Luka in Dallas for a long period of time. But either way, the point being, the time frame to actually build around these players, 6 years passes faster than you think. So just a note there about Wemby and his future. But overall, back getting back to Luka,
Yeah, I do agree. You know, if you have the opportunity to build around a top 5 player who's playing at top 5 levels right now, why waste that talent by waiting? I think it'd be a different scenario if that player was not playing at that level. Like, let's say Luka in his second year in the league was still kind of like Cade, right? You know, Cade's still a young player, but Cade is not playing at a level for you to rush rebuilds, for you to bring stars in because he's playing at this crazy level. No, do not rush that rebuild. But for a Luka, for a Wemby, if Zion stayed healthy, how he was playing going into you know, the NBA, his NBA career, I think those are players where like, okay, let's speed this process up a little bit. Let's not waste these players' time. And I also think Luka is one of the players that suffers from, I am just going to coin it, the Jason Tatum effect. The reason why people are so critical on Luka and his career so far is because he has been shown to us. We have been watching him since he was 19, 20 years old as a rookie. So now here we are, 6 years into his career, and he is still a player that just turned 25. Like, little over a month ago, was still 24 years old. But because he has been in front of our faces since he was 19, because he's been in conversation since his second year in the league, we are now at a point where it's like, when is this guy gonna get an MVP? Oh my God, y'all have been raving about him so much. When is he gonna turn it around? When is he gonna become that guy? What in reality, you're talking about a dude who probably got, unless he retires early and things of that nature, Brody still got like a calm 10 more years in the league. Like, I don't know, bro.
He's had a similar context to his career of the two GOATs. He has had no championship to this point, but the difference is he also doesn't have an MVP, and he doesn't have a very signature, clear MVP season. Like LeBron had 2009, Jordan had, it was either 88 or 87, maybe it was 89, but the year where he averaged like 37, 7 and 5 and like 2 steals and a block, and he was above average efficiency versus the entire league. The Bulls won like 50 games. Luka doesn't have a season quite like that, does not have that MVP. Now maybe he gets that MVP this year, because as we're going to discuss, I don't know if this video first or later, but there's going to be a discussion about Luka and Jokic, because they're pretty much the final 2 candidates for MVP at this point. We've decided to whittle it down to that. Maybe he gets it this year, and he's averaging 36, 9 and 9 on plus fucking 8 true shooting percentage versus the rest of the league. So very, very good numbers, and the Mavericks have been moving up the standings. I actually want to give credit to Rudy, because this is a point that he made in our MVP discussion video of like, what if Luka just jumped the standings? And the Mavericks have just been winning nonstop, and they've been jumping the standings, and looks more and more likely like Luka could win this MVP. But either way, Michael Jordan and LeBron both had 2 MVPs before they were 27, if I'm remembering that correctly. Luka doesn't have one currently. Now, he could win it this year, or he could win it in the next 2 years to match them, but he doesn't have that yet. Also has to rack up the championships. How confident are we that he can do that, especially in the Western Conference with Wemby trailing him? Because a big part about being the GOAT is that you have to be better than everybody, and if Wemby is better than you, you're definitely not going to be the GOAT. And if he has better teams than you and they consistently beat you, and he ends up winning those championships instead of you, well, then Victor is ultimately going to end up being the one that is propped up, not Luka. It's a tricky situation, and I feel like in the NBA, the idea of a dynasty or just winning multiple championships in a row is becoming less and less common. The last 5 NBA champions have all been non-repeat champions. It's been a new team every single year, and I think that's kind of just the way that the game is going. That's how things are now. I guess for better or worse, is there's just more competition at the bottom of the league, which means it's harder to be one of the top dogs at the top of the league. And it just means that racking up 4 to 6 championships, not as likely, not as easy. there is also the factor of longevity.
Yep.
You either have to do what Michael Jordan did, which is just do a whole lot of shit in a 12-year span, or you have to do what LeBron did and just play a comically large amount of time. Now, Luka has actually been mostly an Iron Man throughout his career. Like, he's not like a guaranteed 80-plus games every season guy, but he's pretty good about playing most of the year.
65.
And I have no concern about, like, athletically there being much of a decline, because Luka's skill set athletically is really just more in how he uses his body paired with his mental fortitude, because, like, the stopping and going and all that, that's a part of physical athleticism.
I think when it comes to the GOAT convo, people just needs to be real. People just need to be real with what they value. People just need to be real with what they value. Do you look at a body of work and judge that body of work? Or do you actually just care about the peak? I think that's a hot take of mine. Y'all want to talk about ring culture. Y'all want to talk about MVPs and careers and longevity and all of that. But really, for you, what really matters to you is how was this player playing at the peak of their powers? You know what I'm saying? And I think low-key, the more and more I really analyze basketball, I may lean towards that fact of, listen, we can have conversations about who has the best body of work, but to me, what really matters is how were you playing at the peak of your powers? You know what I'm saying? Because I do think it's unfair to disqualify someone for essentially being a late bloomer. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say Steph Curry. And I understand, like, Steph Curry, in my opinion, is the closest example to this of, okay, let's look at his career, right? He started off career slow. Hell, even motherfuckers were doubting him and the longevity of his whole career after year 3. But that shit picked up real fast, real quick, and over this 6-7 year time span, he has done some incredible things that's just hard to explain. You know what I'm saying? Just because he started off slow, does that disqualify him from the conversation? I think that's unfair to him. Also, this on the flip side of it, to expect LeBron longevity from every single player moving forward. And I guess that goes into the conversation of, like, okay, to be the GOAT, listen, the standards are about to be high as shit. I get that as well. It's like, damn. So just because I had a 15-year peak, let's say I was 38-8 for 15 years, but because LeBron was 27-7-7 for 19, now it's a knock on me, even though within this 15-year stretch, I arguably put up better stats. Like, you get into those conversations. I think when people talk about the greatest player to ever lace them up, they are lying to themselves and trying to mask it as is one thing, when in actuality, what you really care about is how did this player perform at the peak of their powers. When you talk about Steph Curry being this greatest offensive weapon you've ever seen, I think you're really referring to this stretch right here, in my opinion. This is the image in your head that's locked. When you talk about LeBron being the GOAT, the greatest, the most complete player of all time, you're not referring to this stretch right here, right? You're not referring to this stretch right here. You're referring to probably this stretch right here. Yeah, probably this stretch right here. Or, if you want to talk about offensive completeness, probably this stretch right here. Right? And you're lying to yourselves if you think otherwise, in my opinion. Same thing with Jordan. Same thing with Wilt Chamberlain. Same thing with all these dudes. You're really talking about a 3 to 4 year time span. So I would love to see a list where that is the main factor. And that may be something that I need to do. Who peaked higher? You know? Because even when you come up with these all-time drafts, right? Let's do an all-time draft right now. You're not thinking about LeBron with the accumulation of LeBron when you draft LeBron number 1. You're thinking about 2013 LeBron. When you draft Michael Jordan, You're thinking about 1989 Michael Jordan, 1993 Michael Jordan, some sort of... When you draft Kobe Bryant, you're not thinking about 2012 Kobe. You're thinking about 2009, 2008, 2006, 2003 Kobe. You know? So, I don't know.
But it's also that he knows when, like in here, not in his legs, when to stop and start and all that. And even if he's a little bit slower, even if he can't jump as high, he's probably going to be just as devastatingly effective. That's his whole shtick. So I'm not worried about injuries making him a worse player, and I'm not really too concerned about them shortening his career, but there's a difference between not having your career shortened and playing as long as LeBron did. So that's another thing that would be rather difficult to achieve. So the odds are definitely stacked against him, as they kind of are in the GOAT debate pretty much always. So I would just say, in conclusion, for Luka's place in this conversation for being a potential GOAT in the future, that he has not necessarily done a lot to propel his case that he could have otherwise. Like if he had an MVP earlier, if he went further than just a Western Conference Finals appearance, maybe that could prop him up a little bit more. But he also has not like dug himself in a hole. He's pretty much at a neutral point where he can go either way, and it's on both him to do that and then the Dallas Mavericks organization to put those pieces around him, or for him to go somewhere else for them to do that. It's also just a matter of the landscape of the NBA at large. I just don't know that the crazy stacked resume of Michael Jordan or LeBron James is as achievable as it used to be, not because the talent isn't there, but precisely because the talent is there everywhere else. And that's not me knocking the level of competition that they had, because I think that's all valid. I think it's all within its own context, and that's fine. The NBA is undeniably absurdly talented right now, to the point that people are having conversations about there being an expansion just so that we can level this out a little bit. I do think that Luka can still be the GOAT, but Wemby is probably going to be right on his trail. And honestly, I think this is perfect for the NBA's future, because the fact that we have two guys who realistically can get themselves in that conversation, that is very interesting. And I don't know, it's probably been a while since we've had two guys. I mean, technically there's never been a time where two guys were like a true GOAT candidate, but like LeBron and Steph is the last time we've had two like top 10 players of all time going back and forth. And I think after this, Luka and Wemby are going to be doing that in the Western Conference Finals. I think we are going to get Spurs versus Mavericks a couple of times.
That's interesting to me, y'all. The league expansion argument. Just trying to see how that plays out in terms of this conversation. Let's say the league does become more diluted, and it does open the gate for Luka to rack up or Wemby to rack up championships more than they are in this from let's say 2020 to 2024 era, where there is more parity in the league. It is harder to go back to back. Would we then look at those rings and say they're Mickey because of league expansion? Because y'all tried to pull that up with MJ too, but in hindsight, people didn't really care. But I've also seen a resurgence of that argument in recent years. I would love to see what that argument looks like today.
Maybe Luka goes over the East and decides to dominate the East as Michael Jordan and LeBron James did, and they can meet in the finals. Whatever it may be, there's been a lot of discussion about rivalries in the future of the NBA and what that might look like. I think Luka versus Wemby will be a very interesting thing to track throughout the years, even though they're different positions and very different players. They will probably be the two best players in the league for a very long stretch of time, and it's really just going to come down to who can accumulate more titles and MVPs and all that to see who actually ends up getting the closest to being the GOAT, if not actually just outright achieving it. With that said, shout out to Nick for editing this video. Let me know what you think about Luka and the GOAT debate in the comment section below. But that is it. Goodbye.
Yo, shout out to Rusty for the video. Appreciate you. To close off this video, though, I think for Luka, realistically speaking, league expansion is a realistic thing, though. But for me, the GOAT case is a fickle thing where you either gotta win a lot, have crazy longevity, or have crazy peaks. And looking at the peaks that I've seen from a LeBron, from a Michael Jordan, especially given the fact that Luka is not going to be a juggernaut defensively, so he really would need to lean towards the offensive side of his game to be even in that peak discussion. I don't see Luka being a dude that wins 4, 5, 6 rings, 7 rings. I see Luka at max winning 3. I think Luka is also not the type of dude that will play in the NBA for 20 years. I think Luka's going to have a 14, 15-year career, which is standard. I think not everyone needs to play 20 years. And in terms of that peak, again, given the fact that he's not great defensively, Luka would have to put up, like, for multiple seasons, we're talking 39, 40 points a game. That translates to the playoffs type of levels. And if he pulls that shit off, we may have to have some conversations. Or maybe not even from scoring. Maybe his passing takes a leap. I don't know. But if I just had to put a dot on it, I will say this. I think Luka he's not going to be in the GOAT conversation when it's all said and done. Wemby, to have that conversation early on, we can have it because, again, Wemby is such an outlier-ass player. But Wemby, from what I've seen his rookie season, he's on track. I think when you come into the league as a 19, 20-year-old, and we're already having the discussions about your rookie season being one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time, that's a great start. But what are you going to do in these first 5 years? What is your peak going to look like? Those are the unknowns. And how many rings can you rack up depending on how San Antonio builds around you. But, yeah, man, it looks like from all the signs, we're going to be in another era where the Western Conference dominates the NBA. The Eastern Conference is cooked. Jason Tatum, get your rings off now because when Luka and Vic really starts winning for real, it's cooked for the rest of the league. So let's maximize this time while we have it. With that being said, again, shout out to Rusty for the video. His links, the link to his video will be in the description down below. And I'm out of here, man. Peace.